Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's event. My name is Yvonne Bendinger-Rothschild. I'm the Executive Director of the European American Chamber of Commerce in New York, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you together with my colleague, Catherine Previtt, the Director of EACC Paris, and on behalf of the entire EACC Network, to a program that was conceived a while back by my colleague, Catherine, in her ultimate wisdom. She collaborated with OCO Global and RSM on a project to assess the sentiment within the business community to expand from Europe to the United States and the other way around, and created a Transatlantic Expansion Barometer. It has been updated with the new administration in power. And we have a very interesting discussion ahead of us, and Catherine will be moderating the panel. And I want to point out that the session will be recorded and will be available afterwards on our YouTube channel. And in case one of your colleagues missed the program, you can encourage them to watch it there. In the meantime, I will hand over to Catherine, who will guide us through today's discussion. Catherine, over to you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you for your support and your leadership. And thanks all of you joining for taking the time to hear and discuss the results of this new edition of the EAC OCO RCM Transatlantic Expansion Barometer. So the Barometer project is also an EACC network-wide effort that could have not happened with the contribution of all of our EACC chapters, from Texas, Florida, Cincinnati, and the Carolinas to Amsterdam, Rhone-Alpes, and New York. We also want to extend a special thanks to our members at RSM and OCO Global, with whom we partnered to conceive of this study. I remember a discussion with Vincent some months ago, and then following discussions with Maxime, so real partnership in terms of the concept of this, and also the support from OCO Global and RSM on our work on both sides of the Atlantic, and really especially through their analysis and their time today, which we greatly appreciate. The original barometer study was launched in November 2024 to address the need among our members for a clear understanding of the transatlantic investment dynamics. After the recent change in administration in the US, we recognized together the necessity to update this study with fresh insights from European executives regarding the current climate for US expansion. We recently hosted 2 events in Paris over the last few weeks, a hearing at the French Senate and a follow-up panel discussion. We have photos on our LinkedIn channel. Both reports are now available, and we will share links to access these reports with all participants. We're excited to continue these conversations with our members across the EACC network throughout the year, and please stay in touch with your local EACC chapter, also by means of their LinkedIn page. So I have questions from some of you. In the registration form, there was a question, a space for you to indicate a question you might have. Also, feel free to ask questions by means of the Q&A function, so I'll be getting these questions as well. This webinar in EACC style will respect the timing of 1 hour, with the first 20 minutes going to Vincent and Maxime with the challenge of bringing a lot of this insight, I think 35 pages of the report, into 20 minutes, so we leave plenty of time for your questions to make the bulk of this time we have together. I'm pleased now to introduce the 2 experts who led the Barometer project with us: Vincent Rofast, Consulting Director, or Head of Advisory, at OCO Global, and Maxime Adam, Partner at RSM France. So Vincent specializes in investment strategies and international expansion, advising governments and companies on foreign direct investment strategy with a focus on Europe-US relations. Maxime Adam is a partner at RSM France, but he leads the US practice at RSM France, also with extensive experience advising mid-market companies on compliance, audit, and successful market entry in the US and Europe. And with that introduction, I'm very pleased to hand over the microphone and the floor to Maxime and Vincent. I believe we're starting with you, Maxime, is that correct?
I think it will be Vincent.
Then it's Vincent.
It's me. Yes, thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We'll try to keep it, short, to be disciplined and keep it to 20 minutes. Maybe before we go, into the results of this study, just a few, words about the context and the methodology behind it. As Catherine explained, this report is actually the second edition of a report which started an initiative which started last year in November 2024, so just after the US presidential elections. And with this update, we wanted to, we deliberately wanted to have this update published in June because we wanted to have a view or an understanding of the impact of 6 months of the new Trump presidency on the investment flows between US and Europe, so both ways, even though, as you will see in this report, there is much more of a focus on Europe to US investment flows. In terms of the methodology, so everyone understands that what we're after is taking the pulse of the investors' sentiment and plans on both sides of the Atlantic. And to do that, we have two main sources of information. So the first one is looking at FDI statistics. So using databases we have access to, including proprietary databases. But on top of that, we've had in-depth conversations with our clients, with companies we interact with on a daily basis. So 65 of them, all of them being mid-sized businesses, and the vast majority of them being European mid-sized businesses, which explains why we have such a focus on Europe to US investment. The study, so this report is in two main parts. So one of them is looking at Europe to US investment flows, and the other one is the other way around, is looking at US to Europe investment flows. Also keep in mind, but we'll try to make that clear, that every time we look at this investment relationship, there are two time scales that we're talking about. So one is the long time series of investment, looking at the history of investment flows between both sides of the Atlantic to try to get to put things in perspective. And the other one, which is very interesting, I guess, for everyone, is looking at the latest development, especially what's been happening since over the past 6 months, and trying to understand what's going to be the immediate future of this relationship in the new environment. So having said that, we're going to jump straight to the results. So maybe Maxime, you can move to the next page, which is about, so now we're looking at investment flows from Europe to the US. By the way, when we say Europe, it's not, it's more than just the European Union. We're including the UK, we're including countries as Turkey as well. So it's the enlarged region. And when we talk about investment, what we mean is greenfield, brownfield investment, physical investment that creates jobs, in the foreign or the other region. So looking at European FDI into the US, first thing we did was, what's the history of this investment relationship? And if you move to the next page, Maxime, as you can see here, European investment into the US has been growing continuously over the past 20 years. So, there has been, a few drops here and there due to, for example, the COVID crisis. But, by and large, it's been really growing quite steadily since over the past 20 years. And what's interesting is that since 2022, what we're seeing is actually an acceleration of these investment flows from Europe to the US. Investment has been growing by plus 19% over this period of time, which is like a very significant acceleration. And do remember this figure, because later, we'll talk about some other investment trends, which will be interesting in contrast to this one. So the first question that arises for everyone when we see that is, what happened? How come European investment into the US has been growing so fast over the past 3 years? And there are multiple reasons for that. So the first thing that we should remember is that it started before Trump, way before Trump. So it's not related to any of the Trump administration announcement or anything like that. There is obviously some factors that had a significant role, such as the IRA, and Maxime is going to elaborate a bit further around that. But it's not the only thing. There is also two main factors that are quite interesting to have in mind. One is the economic growth, which has been much more sustained in the US compared to the EU. So in the US, it's been, for example, in 2024, 2.8%, whereas in Europe, you have pockets of, it varies between slow growth and negative growth sometimes. So European investors feel much more attracted by the US because of that. The other thing also is related to the competitiveness of Europe compared to the US. And just one fact around that, if you take just the energy cost that we're experiencing, unfortunately, in Europe, that we've been experiencing for the past few years now, especially as a consequence, as a result of the war in Ukraine, is the cost of the electricity costs, which are 2 to 4 times higher in Europe than in the US. So all those factors combined, are kind of inciting European investors to look somewhere else and to invest their money to develop operations, etc., in other markets and predominantly in the US. So having said that, Maxime, I'm going to let you elaborate a bit more on the IRA.
Yes, thank you, Vincent, and hello, everyone. As you said, Vincent, this growth in European investment is closely linked to the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a 370 billion public support plan that was implemented in the US in 2022. And the goal of the IRA is to strongly boost the investment in green tech, in local industry, and the energy transition. And these incentives are only for companies that produce in the US, which pushed many European businesses to expand their production there. And at the same time, and as Vincent was saying, Europe is facing higher energy costs, more geopolitical tension, and general economic slowdown. Just an example, the US growth in 2024 was 2.8% when it was only 0.7% in the Eurozone. So the IRA adds to other strengths of the US market, like its size, the level of integration, and this helps explain the acceleration of European investment. For example, if we move to the next slide, sorry, this one, if we look at the number of European investment in logistic distribution and transportation between 2022 and 2024, it has been increased by 98%. Same if we look at the energy and natural resources, in the same period of time, it went from 37 projects to 111 projects, so a growth of more than 300%, which is a very strong growth. But what we see from the barometer is that the growth is not the same everywhere, and different trends are noted between the states. And Vincent, I will let you tell us more about that.
Exactly. So thanks. So can you go to the map? Yeah, okay. So when we actually look at the map of European investment into the US recently, what we can see is that there is quite a shift in this map, where European investors used to invest predominantly in the northeast of the US or the West Coast, and especially in California, in digital type of services, financial services, business services, etc. Now, what we've seen in recent years is kind of a shift towards more southern states, not only, but to new states in the US. And so here you can see as an illustration on this map that many of the investment projects coming from Europe to the US are now going to states such as, Arizona, Texas, Florida, Louisiana, Ohio, etc. So that's quite new. There are, reasons for that. It's very much driven by the new nature of investment, which is coming from Europe, which is, as Maxime just explained, much more driven by manufacturing type of activities or industry-related activities. And over the years, and especially over the past 3 years, the US has really managed to position as a industrial hub for industrial investment for investors coming from Europe. So that's quite new. We think this is a long-term shift, so it's not going to end. But it's very interesting to look at this map and how things have changed in recent years.
Thank you, Vincent. So now let's take a closer look at which European countries are really driving investment into the US today. What we can see is that 5 European countries now represent over 69% of industrial and R&D investment in the US. Those countries are Germany, France, the UK, Switzerland, and Italy, as you can see on this slide. And if we focus a bit more on France, we see that France ranks second in terms of manufacturing investment and third in terms of R&D investment. This strong position is likely to continue and maybe even to improve, especially considering some recent announcement from major French companies. For example, CMA CGM announced a 20 billion investment plan over the next 4 years. So we have to be cautious about this kind of announcement, as we don't really know how much they invest in the past 4 years. But 20 billion is still a very large investment. Another example, Bernard Arnault recently said that LVMH is seriously considering expanding its production capacity in the US, where he sees, in his words, a wave of optimism. So these are all announcements made in 2025. And Vincent will now share more insight about the trends we've seen over the last 6 months, but more specifically about the mid-sized companies.
Yes, thanks, Maxime. So I guess the million-dollar question that everybody has is, we can see that Trump has a very different approach to investment attraction than Biden, for example. It's a bit, more, let's say, a punitive approach to FDI attraction, which consists in saying, okay, so there will be tariffs. Okay, so if you want to avoid those tariffs, well, it's very simple. You just have to make your products in America, and there will be no tariffs. So the key question is, is that paying off? Does that work really? Does that, bring investment into the country? It's very hard to give, a very, straightforward answer, yes, no, and so on. But we have some very interesting indicators, to try to understand what's going to be, the result of such policy and what's going to be the impact of investment. So the first thing we looked at was, what is the statistics telling us? So if we move to the next page, Maxime, yes. So when you compare the FDI statistics from Europe to US, so investment from Europe to the US, for the first quarter of 2025 compared to the first quarter of 2024, actually, what we're seeing is a 50% decrease of investment. So if you compare that to the plus 19% in recent years, that's quite a change. So that's the first indicator, because it's just an indicator. It doesn't mean that it's going to be like that for the whole year of 2025. What we know as well from the interviews that we've been having, so the in-depth conversations that we've been having with the 65 companies we've been interviewing, is that actually, for sure, none of them, 0 of them, told us that they are considering investing in the US as a direct result of the risk of tariffs. So none of them. In fact, they are all, kind of, adopting a wait-and-see attitude. they really don't like the the instability that all the tariff shifts have created, because what they need as investors is they need long-term stability, and those shifts around tariffs are quite the opposite. Having said that, they all told us, so 100% of them told us that kind of they can't wait for the situation to stabilize, because they all consider the US as their top priority investment zone when it comes to developing their activities abroad. So it's very key, very important to have in mind, because no plans directly related to the new U.S. investment climate. But yes, there is still a very, very strong interest for this market as an investment zone on the longer term. Okay, so that's really key to have in mind. And then we're gonna explore a bit further, what I mean, we need to nuance a bit all of that. It's not one size fits all. So now we're gonna try to explain what are the various investment patterns or behaviors that we're seeing from the interviews that we've been having.
Thank you, Vincent. Yes, as we mentioned earlier, for this barometer, we conducted a qualitative interview with 65 leaders from European companies, mostly international mid-sized firms. And this conversation gave us valuable on-the-ground insights into their strategy and priorities regarding the US market. What you can see here on the screen are some interesting quotes from some of the leaders we interviewed. And from this discussion, we identified 3 key factors that are shaping today's investment decision, especially at the start of Donald Trump's second term. The first one is the level of maturity of the project. This was one of the clearest messages from our interview. So on one side, we have the project that were really mature and well advanced. Those ones have been fast-tracked to ensure to complete their implementation before the potential protectionist measures, such as new tariffs, for example. And on the other hand, early stage or exploratory projects are mostly being put on hold as companies wait for more stability on the political and economic direction in the coming months. And as Vincent was saying, it's important to note that we have not identified any project launch as a direct reaction to Donald Trump's announcement, at least not from SMEs or mid-cap. And the general approach right now is to be prudent for them in a context that is still widely seen as unstable. For the second one, Vincent, I will let you tell us more about the...
Yeah, so the second driver shaping those investment patterns is the level of integration of supply chains. So very, simply here, we've been talking to companies who have, some of them who have supply chains which are kind of exclusively located into the US. So a very low level of dependency on foreign markets for their supply chains in the US. So for them, no change at all, with the tariffs and all the risks around the tariffs. They keep, their investment plans going. There is, one nuance still for them as well, which is for some of them, what we've really noticed is that for the first time, they start to have to be a bit more cautious about the economic growth prospects in the US, which could be downgraded as a result of, all the discussions around the tariffs. But overall, it's really about, for them, it's really about maintaining their investment plans. I'm thinking of a European manufacturing companies in the chemicals industry, which is actually right now progressing their investment plans in the US, and really tariffs are not really an important topic for them because their supply chain is very US localized. For those companies where their supply chain is much more international or regional even, then that's more of a problem, more of a challenge. Just to give you two quick examples to illustrate that. One of the companies we've interviewed is an Irish company with manufacturing operations in Mexico to serve the whole North American market. And for them, what they told us is, look clearly, all those discussions around tariffs will not make us, relocate our manufacturing operations to the US because it would take too long. It would be too costly and too risky because we don't know what the future is going to look like. So instead of that, we're going to maintain our operations in Mexico. But what we're going to do is that instead of considering Mexico only as a source market, we're going to consider it also as a sales market. So that's something which is quite new, to the kind of attitudes that we can see from investors. Another example is an Italian company who is manufacturing from Italy. They have presence already in the US, and a bit of the same. What they told us is that if tariffs are applied, they will have no choice but just absorb those tariffs and hopefully pass them on to their end customers, because relocating for them their manufacturing operations into the US would take at least 5 years. They are facing labor shortages and so on and so forth. So you see that for those companies it's really not like as simple as that, and that's the reason why they just wait until they see how things are going to settle before they can make any real investment or further development decisions in the US market. For the third factor, Maxime, I'm going to let you explain what we're seeing.
Yeah, thank you, Vincent. As you can see, this third factor is related to the sector. So the trends that we observe are clearly different from one industry to another, because the impact of the regulatory and economic changes differs significantly from one sector to another. We choose to highlight this point by focusing on three specific sectors. The first one is automotive. The sector remains very attractive for European players. We are seeing a renewed interest in combustion and hybrid engine, because this is a direction that is supported by Donald Trump. And at the same time, momentum continues around electric vehicles, largely driven by the IRA incentives, as we mentioned earlier. The second sectors we would like to talk about here is biotech. The US also remains very attractive in this field. For many European biotech companies, it's the market to be in. The FDA provide a clear and efficient regulatory framework, and access to capital is far greater than what we can see in Europe. And you will find a powerful testimonial on this topic in the barometer. The third sector we would like to illustrate here is industrial equipment. What we see is that for SMEs and mid-sized companies, the picture is more nuanced because they are more sensitive to regulatory instability, and some of them see a real risk of rising costs, especially for steel and aluminum, due to potential new tariffs. As a reminder, in the worst case scenario, the tariff could reach up to 50% in terms of steel and aluminum. So there is a big issue here.
This is good. I'm just going to jump in because Vincent and Maxime, I didn't have the last version of the presentation. Do you have how many slides left?
We're going to go very fast on the last.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, so let's. Okay, so now, a few highlights around. So the other around US investment into Europe, promised is going to be just a highlight. So same, to start, if you look at what's been the long-term investment flow. If you can move to the next slide, please, Maxime.
Yeah.
So what's been happening over the past 20 years from the US. So here you can see that investment has been growing until 2022. And now what we're seeing from 2022 actually is a big drop in investment, minus 35%, okay, which is much more significant than the drops that we've seen during the financial crisis, even during the pandemic. So it's very it's very significant. So something must have happened here. So how to explain such a drop, which seems to be a big shift, a big profound shift in the investment flows from US to Europe? Well, it's a bit of the same as what we explained, with the significant increase in European investment into the US. It's because of the gap in economic growth perspective. Competitiveness is another one, and the IRA as well, which we know from the interviews that we've been having, that it's been actually redirecting some of the investment projects which would have initially gone to Europe, and that instead of that stayed in the US, so were invested domestically, so as to benefit from the IRA package. So that's in a nutshell what's been the latest changes in this relationship. And now we're gonna go quickly into some more details around that, but promise it's not going to be too long.
Yeah, very fast. Thank you, Vincent. What we want to show you here is that we have some European countries that are really affected by this drop of American investment in Europe. Those countries are mainly UK, France, and Germany, because that are the big economy in Europe. But there is also one other country that is very impacted. It's Ireland, because around 10% of their GDP depends of the US economy, and with the drop that we are seeing right now, Ireland is really suffering in terms of investment coming from the US. That's a first thing. If we look also at another topic, which is the intra-European investment, so it was on the previous slide here, Europe to Europe. What we can see is that the number of intra-European FDI projects decreased by 6% in 2023 and by 7% in 2024. Just a reminder, the intra-European investment are historically the main driver of FDI in Europe. It's accounting for around 60% of all projects each year. So this kind of decrease is very impactful for Europe. And as we can see, Europe is now facing a double challenge. On one side, the decline of internal investment, and on the other side, the reduction of interest from US investors. In this context, reactivating intra-European investment has become a major strategic priority to protect the competitiveness and resilience of the European economy. Very fast also, what we've developed into the barometer is that we wanted to do a quick focus on what's going on the Asian side, and to answer to this question, will China become Europe's new main investment partner in this context? What we see is that between 2022 and 2024, Chinese investment projects in Europe grew significantly by around 45%. So we show a renewed interest in the European market. However, despite this large increase, the volume of Chinese investment is still far below the one of the US, representing only about 20% of the US investment. So far, it's not enough to offset the decline of investment coming from other sources. I think that's all we can say regarding that. Vincent, I can let you finish the presentation if you
Yeah,
want with some.
maybe. So one last word about so trying to looking ahead, or I mean over the past 6 months and ahead. What we can see is that we don't, as long as the as Europe doesn't recover from this slow growth, the lack of competitiveness, we don't expect US investment into Europe to pick up again. So this is what we're seeing already from the first quarter of 2025 compared to the first quarter of 2024. Where the decline has continued by 7% in number of US investment projects into the US. It doesn't mean that it's the end of US investment in Europe, because after all, there are not that many global regions which are still rather attractive for foreign investment, and investors need to invest somewhere. So investment will still happen, but we should expect a world of fewer projects, but better projects, and probably bigger projects as well, in new sectors such as artificial intelligence, data centers, and so on, which we're still seeing quite a number of them happening from the US into Europe. And as for Europe, how to improve its attractiveness for FDI, I think here there is real consensus, from the interviews that we've been having around the recommendations from the Draghi report, which is basically, public support, like a new deal for innovation and economic growth, as well as a simplified set of regulations, because the European market is still quite rightly perceived as a complex regulatory environment, which is hard to navigate. So all of that, if well implemented, of course, can will be able to improve the attractiveness of Europe for investment, including US investment as well. So I think we're going to stop there. Sorry for that, Catherine. I think we're almost on time.
Yeah. That's great. And I would say maybe losing some technical points for going over time, but thanks to both of you for the obvious work you did to make the presentation engaging and how you're presenting it. So appreciation for that and making it a strong presentation from a content and also from a form position. So I'm going to go right into a few questions. We have actually some interesting questions coming in on the Q&A, but don't look at them because I have some that have come in earlier. Just a first question to set the stage is that when we started off on this project, you start a study, there's certain hypotheses you have, there's certain things you're thinking, and it just, in terms of stage setting, was there something, did this study confirm your hypothesis, or was there anything surprising to you, when you were getting the results in, for example, from the interview? I just would throw that out to each of you in terms of what you started with, as a working hypothesis and what the results showed you.
What we see is what Vincent explained is that the United States is and will remain a top priority country for European investors. So this is really clear from the interview we did, especially two interviews that we share on the barometer. One from Scutum, where they said that the US remains central to their strategy, and there is a second one that you will find also in the barometer from a biotech company, and they said that going to the US is really necessary to raise significant funds. So first point to answer this question, I would say the US will remain a top priority country. Now, what we see is obviously a decrease in terms of investment. Why? Certainly because business leaders don't like to have too many rules. especially when it comes to tariffs. And that's why Donald Trump's policy did not work as planned. And according to us, this is not very surprising because business strategies are usually made for the medium or long term, while political decisions often have only short or medium term effect. So yeah, we don't see the new investment momentum. And we even noticed that some company decided to leave the US. There is one example of a French company from the west side of France called Lacroix Technology. They decided to step down a couple of weeks ago as a result of what's going on right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Vincent, I'll put that right to you as well. Did this,
Yeah, so
you were
yeah,
thinking
I would say that I was more surprised by what happened in over the past 3 years than what's happening right now, because I didn't. I mean, I knew obviously that for all the reasons that we've explained around the IRA, which is hard to compete with for Europe. With the gap in economic growth, in competitiveness, I knew, of course, that that was attracting European investment into the US and kind of inciting US investors to invest domestically. But I was not, I didn't know it was to such an extent, right? It's really to a very large extent this has happened. So that was the magnitude of those trends was the real surprise for me. As for the attitude of investors, I mean, we know investors because we work with them on a daily basis, and the first thing we know is that, I mean, they really don't like, the lack of visibility, instability, because investing, especially when it comes to manufacturing operations, is really a long-term thing. And so when you invest for the long term, the first thing you need is a predictable environment. And the first thing they are not seeing with those shifts around tariffs is this predictable environment. So not too surprised about that, but I hope, yes, things will settle soon, and investors will be able to make plans, real plans again very soon.
Very good, thank you. And I also, my colleague Yvonne has a question, but just I'm going to follow up on that because you had qualitative interviews and analysis, but you also, in terms of your clients, in terms of more in depth, I know you can't say any names of companies or things like that, but did you have something in terms of, like Vincent, Maxime, quickly, like in terms of your client experience, did you, can you say something to that in terms of actual examples that, I mean, I know that you can't talk in detail, but.
Well, we have two examples that are not confidential that are exposed in the barometer. One is from a well-known French company, Fleury Michon. They want to open to do a greenfield investment in the US. They are still working on it. But this is more a decision that was taken before Donald Trump election. Because what we see is that there is less new greenfield projects since his election. So this one was decided before. There is another example from Scutum where they say that the US remain a top priority, as I said just earlier. So we have a couple examples and obviously more example from other companies, the biotech companies that anyway wants to go to the US to reach funds to benefits from the FDA regulatory that is more I think easier for them to navigate than the one in Europe. So definitely there is a trend of investment still.
Thanks, Maxime. Would you like to add something, Vincent?
Well, I would only echo that completely. The projects that we're seeing from Europe into the US are, for all of them, projects that are happening now and even announced now, but they were decided before. And we're still seeing projects which are starting now, but they could have started before. The reason why they are starting now is because they are quite immune to any risk of tariffs, and so the fundamental thing that we're seeing is that fundamentally the US for European investors is still perceived as the big opportunity, and so they are just waiting for conditions, to settle before they can take their investment projects forward. We can't hear you, Catherine, you're on mute.
And the good old mute button. Yvonne, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, EACC New York. Yvonne, you had a question?
A fascinating presentation, I have to say. Thank you very much. What I was wondering, I mean, there are so many things that influence these investment decisions, and you outlined, quite the nuances that are involved in that. What I was wondering, we're all talking about tariffs, but it's not only about the tariffs. I mean, there are some policy decisions coming out of the European Union, like Rearm EU and other, the European Gateway, that are pushing a lot of money into the EU for infrastructure projects, etc. And I see a lot of US companies and US investors investing into the European Union. I mean, there's a joke among economists, we're all buying Rheinmetall. And I'm sure it's the same with Dassault and other, not only stocks, but also ETFs, etc. I would love to hear your thought on how that is affecting investment going the other direction as well.
I think, this is really happening, and this is where we're still seeing some quite significant US investment projects happening in Europe. So definitely those, we know that those packages work, right? We know that where there is support to infrastructure development, to new technologies, etc., that attracts investors. So for sure, this is working. The big risk that we're seeing is that right now Europe is kind of because Europe, especially the EU, because that's where the EU makes sense. But the EU is 27 countries, so before it can come, with a well-coordinated support or investment incentive packages and so on. That's where it can take a bit of time, and so that's why the recommendations from the Draghi report makes total sense. But it's kind of easy to say, very hard to implement, because you need to get all the 27 countries well coordinated. But for sure, even with the measures that are happening now in Germany, that's good for the attractiveness, not just of Germany, but the rest of Europe as well. But we need more of that. That's really what's needed right now.
Thanks. And I'll go for another question. I'm trying to look at, there's two really good questions. There are more in the chat. I'll invite both of you, Maxime and Vincent, to take a look, because it'd be interesting if you picked a question that you want to respond to. But one thing, there's two questions actually together, and there's one question from a participant that says, given the growing uncertainty around US trade policy and global supply chains, how are mid-sized EU firms, European firms, balancing the strategic need to expand in the US with rising operational risks, particularly in talent mobility? And this goes to another questions that someone wrote about what investments stand out, type of investment in areas, and what is being done to ease the process of getting workers over from the EU to the US and vice versa. So I don't know if either you want to take either or both of those questions. Who wants to go for it?
That's probably, sorry, Maxime, if you want to go first, let me know.
He just threw you into the fire, Maxime.
Yeah, that's fine.
No,
that's
I'm
fine.
happy.
I'm joking.
So there, just want to be sure on which one you were, Catherine. I see the question on the chat. I see that
they're actually similar, and you can pick one. But it's actually talking about talent mobility, and it's talking about the process for getting workers, because I know at RSM you also have a part that works on that.
So I can illustrate that with one example, really coming from RSM, where try to always have somebody from France in the US, helping French client to operate in the US. I was the one going there 2 years ago under Biden as president. It was really easy to move to the US. The process of getting visa and everything was not easy, but still doable. And for the other people that when they are 6 months ago or a bit less than that, it was very complicated to obtain the new visa. So I think for sure there is an issue about that, about transferring people from Europe to US. And that's true if we just look at EU to the US, but it's also true for some other region. And I'm thinking to Mexico, for example, where is coming a lot of the workforce from the US. We know that some people in the interview that we've done told us we don't want to go, we want to avoid investing to the US, not because of the tariff, because we just don't know if we will have workers there, because it's more and more complicated to have access to blue collars workers, I would say. So obviously it's a huge impact. It has a huge impact, yes.
And maybe we can add that. Sorry, Catherine. No, yeah.
Thank you, Max.
No, maybe we can add that what we're seeing as well is that for sure. I mean, across Europe, Europe is would really like to seize the opportunity of what's happening right now in the US to attract talent, especially in R&D. To attract them to Europe and to position as a kind of safe haven for them. So I know we can see some initiatives around that to make sure or to try to attract those who lost their job for because of recent budget cuts and so on. But having said that, of course, as you know, it's hard for European countries to compete in terms of salary with what you would get, in the US. But definitely, they see a recent development in US politics as an opportunity to drain brains from the US into Europe. So we'll see if that works or not. But that's definitely a trend that we're seeing happening now.
Thanks, Vincent. We're running to the last minutes of the webinar, and I wanted to ask you, was there a burning question that you saw in the Q&A that if you had one more question to answer, you think this is the one that needs to be answered for people you've seen the participant list for people who are online?
Let me check.
Otherwise, I can come up. Yes.
Just after, I see that there is one about the potential slowdown in biotech investment in the US. Yes, this is a good question because we know that there is some discussion going on about the drug pricing and a potential reduction of the margin for this sector. But in the same time, maybe the margin will be lower in the US tomorrow than what they are today, but the US is still a huge market with way better margin than what we have in France or in Europe. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that you have so many options to raise a significant fund in the US compared to Europe that anyway, to finance your R&D, for example, you have to be present in the US. And once you are there, you will deliver on the market. So of course, it's something, this risk around the drug pricing, but from what we've heard, the sector still remain very attractive.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm looking at the questions. Honestly, all good questions. I'd love to try and answer all of them, even though it's hard to give a very definitive answer to any of them. So if I had to pick one, but again, sorry to others because all good questions really. But there is one question around deregulation. So can the process of deregulation can be applied for each EU country, or has to be done in sync within the EU order to make it more attractive for FDI? So, I mean, quite clearly, the more coordinated, the better. So there is a need for simplification, but there is also very much a need for coordination. And this is where, because the lack of coordination makes it more complex. So you can have like 27 very simple regulations, but since investors look at the whole Europe, they don't really look at one specific country. They look at the single market, especially. So that's where we need coordination. it's always a challenge. It's always been a challenge. I think, just because there are 27 governments that need to agree on the right policy doesn't mean that, it's not going to happen. It has worked, for the past decades at least. But yes, there is clearly now more than ever a need for this kind of unified approach to FDI attraction policies in Europe if it wants to bring back investment from the US.
I see one question. Thank you, Vincent. And I think we want to wrap up right now, but there is one question around the methodology, and I think it's important to answer it. It's why do you measure FDI activity with numbers of projects instead of value of the actual investment? And Vincent, I know you can answer that because we've talked about it, but I think it's good to clarify about the methodology too.
Thank you.
Vincent?
Sorry, the question was for me. Sorry.
Yeah.
So no, absolutely. So yeah, the reason why we look at number of projects is, as I explained before, is because what we want to measure is those projects that create jobs, and so it's kind of a standard approach to this. This FDI count is kind of the standard approach when it comes to greenfield investment, and because it doesn't mean necessarily that if you have a big project with big investment value, big capex, that is going to create that many jobs. I mean, there is a bit of the relation between the two, but not always. So so that's why to measure the investment activity, we tend to look at that to have a perfect approach. We should combine, number of projects with capex, with job creation. None of them is ideal, but yeah, for the one indicator which is the closest to what we want to measure is this one, even though I fully accept that it's not a perfect indicator.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Thanks, Maxime. And I'll just hand it over to my colleague, Yvonne, for some closing remarks. Thanks a lot for your time. And as we mentioned before, we're going to send all of you a link so you can access this barometer and also perhaps the previous edition. And there will be a recording of this conversation, this presentation on our YouTube channel. And with that, over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. We hope that the presentation will help you and your team make better decisions or more informed decisions going forward. And as I mentioned earlier, the recording will be available on the EACC YouTube channel. And we encourage you to reach out to your local chapter to follow up on events and more in-depth briefings like this one. And if you have additional questions for our panel, please reach out to your local chapter heads. We will be happy to connect you. If you're not a member of the EACC network, we invite you to join and become an active part of the transatlantic dialogue. You will be able to participate and showcase your thought leadership like our friends at OCO and RSM. And a warm thank you again to RSM and OCO Global, and specifically our panel for this excellent presentation, really, really insightful. And I mean, we will continue how this is going to develop over the next remaining 3 years, and maybe do another update in maybe 2 years from now. And see how things develop. But excellent presentation and really interesting insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.